Hey folks, well, it's been a successful week deer hunting here on the farm. I got these two deer here, a really nice 8-pointer with about a 20-inch outside spread and a big old doe. This guy right here, he's about 5.5 years old, I suspect. Um, but these two deer I took just in the normal course of working on the farm. I wasn't actually hunting when I took these deer. I was just doing my thing on the farm. About half the deer I take every year, that's how I take. I'm out working on the fences. I'm out feeding the cows, checking the cows, doing some sort of other work on the farm, and cutting firewood, whatever. And I happen across a deer, and I take it. Well, that's what happened with these two. And since I wasn't able to record it for y'all, let me tell you the story. We'll start with the big guy here. So the other day, Lady Antioch and the princesses and I, we needed to go to the big town. And so I didn't have a whole lot of time that morning to go feed the cows. So I left here before daylight, and I drove over to the old corral. And I was sitting up at the old corral right as it was getting light. And off in the distance, I could hear some dogs running. Like maybe some hunters hadn't caught the dogs the day before, hadn't got up with them, and they were still running. And I sat there and listened to them for a minute or so, and then I saw something moving along the edge of the woods. And it was this guy. I thought to myself, I said, well, that's a deer for sure, and I believe that's a nice sized buck. I could see his horns, but I couldn't tell just how big they were. You know, he was a couple hundred yards away. And the only rifle I had with me that day was my Henry 45-70. It was sitting on the first row of the gun safe, so that was what I had grabbed that morning when I went to check on the cows. So I got out the truck, got the rifle out, and I laid the rifle out across on top of the corral gate there. And I looked at him. I said, yeah, that's a really nice buck. I said, if he gives me a shot, I'm going to take it. And he stopped and turned and looked back up towards the corral. And when he did that, I dropped the hammer on him. I hit him with the Fiocchi 300 grain jacketed soft point. Hit him a little bit further back than I intended to. But he was out there far enough that that 45-70 is slow enough that the rifle, the report from the rifle had calmed down, and I heard the bullet hit him good. I said, yeah, I hit him hard. And I seen his back legs kick up, and he went down kind of in the front end here. But he caught himself, and he ran about 100 yards. I could see him for about 100 yards after I shot. He ran along the woods about 100 yards, but just before he went into the woods there, I saw him stumble. I said, he probably won't be far. And so I went on and fed the cows and did what I had to do. And then later on, I came back to check on it, to check on him. And I pulled down there to where I had saw him go into the woods. And I stepped out there at the corner there. And he was laying about 10 yards over into the woods, just piled up on the log. He hit that log and just piled up over top of it. And it was really cold that day. And it's been cold ever since. The last 4 or 5 days, we've had cold weather here. Unusual for this time of year in the southeast here. It was actually so cold that he had started to freeze. And he actually did freeze. Both of these deer froze. And they're just now thawing out enough to where I can get them cleaned up. So that's why I'm making this video. I'm getting ready to clean them. But I wanted to tell you the story before I cleaned them up. But that's how I got him. Just feeding the cows. I shot him off the corral gate. That 45-70, the 300 grain 45-70 didn't pass through this big boy either. It went on this side and hit a rib on the off side and exploded, shattered, destroyed the back end of his lungs and his liver. It's amazing that he ran as far as he did, but big deer can go a long ways after they've been shot. Now the doe over here, she was a very similar story. I had fed the cows in the corral, and after I feed the cows, I make a trip down through the pasture to check and make sure everybody's there. I try to count them as they come in, but you get that many big black cows in one spot. They're different sizes. It's hard to make sure to get an accurate count. So I went down and drove to the back of the pasture. I looked and didn't see any cows, so I came back up to the corral there. And I was counting the calves, because the calves never go into the corral with the cows, because they don't stand a chance of getting the feed. The cows won't let them to the trough. They're just not big enough bully their way in. So I was sitting there counting the calves, and I looked down the hill. There's a finger of woods that come out into the pasture. And I looked down the hill at that finger of woods to check and make sure there wasn't a cast in there, because they like to lay down there. And I saw something standing down there. I said, well, those aren't calves. I said, no, they were deer. So I got out the truck, and I set up the tripod there and laid my rifle on it. That day I had the 25-45 Sharps. It's an AR-15. It's a carbine, 16-inch barrel. And I set the rifle up on the tripod, and I looked, and yeah, those are does. Two big does. And this one here happens to be one that we've been after all hunting season. This doe, we think she got hit by a car right before deer season came in. She's blind. She's got one eye that's been knocked out. She's got her side of her face is messed up. Her jaw's messed up. And her tongue has been hanging out of her mouth for months. It's like her tongue is broke. It's shriveled up, dried out. It's cut up. Pretty sure a car hit her. And I said, yeah, well, there she is. I'm going to shoot her. And so I shot her with the 25-45 Sharps. She was angling kind of hard towards me. I shot her in what would be her right side shoulder. The bullet went through her chest cavity and into her guts, went through her diaphragm and into her intestines and stuff. It made a mess, but I cleaned it up. And the bullet didn't pass out of her. It lodged into the back end of her back there. But she didn't run very far. She ran about 40 yards and piled up. She turned and went back down that finger of woods, and I walked down there a few minutes later after I finished counting the calves, and she was laying in that same finger of woods. She never made it back to the creek that finger comes out of. It's a little spring at the head of that finger of woods. That's what they were doing. They were in there eating acorns or something. A lot of oak trees along that little spring. But anyway, that's kind of a lot of deer get killed on the farm that way. We just bump into them while we're farming. What's important about deer hunting is just being out in the woods, just being outside. You don't necessarily have to be sitting in a tree stand or in a shooting house or in a ground blind to get deer. You just got to be outside where the deer are. And sometimes the Lord just rewards you for being out there with them. So until next time, y'all stay safe in the deer woods, and God bless.